This is a substation which is part of the national grid. The national grid is a series of cables, pylons and substations transporting electricity from power stations to our homes. So why do we need to know about the national grid?
Well, because there are two types of PV systems, one that is connected to the national grid and one that isn't. Let's have a look at them in more detail.
95% of all PV in the UK is actually linked into the grid. So what we mean by that is you have your system, your modules linked together, and they're producing a direct current, and that direct current goes into the building through something called an inverter. That inverter takes your direct current into an alternating current, and we link it directly into the national grid.
PV systems like these are called grid connected because they're connected to the national grid. These sorts of systems get the best of both worlds because during the day, the building gets its electricity from the PV system, and during the night, it gets its electricity from the national grid. If the PV system produces more electricity than the building needs, it's sent back to the national grid for somebody else to use. Those lucky people that produce more electricity than they use get a cheque back at the end of each year from their electricity provider. How good is that?
However, when you live in the mountains of Wales in a place like this, the cost of connecting your house to the grid is often too expensive. We call PV systems like this one off-grid because it's not connected to the grid. Other examples of off-grid systems can be found on lampposts, road signs, and in parking meters. This example of an off-grid system is powered by both a PV array and a wind turbine. In the summer, when there's lots of sun and not much wind, the PV works best. In the winter, when the wind is blowing on a cold, dark day, the wind turbine is best.
So what happens on a windless night when there's no solar energy, no wind energy, and you're not connected to the national grid? Does that mean that your house falls into darkness and you miss your favourite episode of The Simpsons?
Of course not. An off-grid house like this has a bank of batteries, which means in this situation you don't need to worry about the TV switching off. The experts tell me what PV powers in the UK.
This calculator has a little PV cell just there.
Yeah.
It's only small because it doesn't really require very much energy. And inside there's a little battery, so when it's dark, we can still use the calculator. This would generate about 5 watts, and that's about all you need for small off-grid PV
devices.
systems. Yeah, and an off-grid PV system is something that uses battery, and quite often you find them dotted along motorways, collecting power.
Or at bus stops.
At bus stops, yeah. Quite often they're used to charge up batteries for electrified fences. When the fence and the animals are in the middle of nowhere, you can't run an electric cable to it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by an off-grid PV system.
Okay.
This is about 5 watts, yeah. This is quite often found on tops of caravans and mobile homes. When you're camping for a week and you don't have an electricity and you're using your TV or your lights, the batteries will go flat in your mobile home or your caravan. So rather than having the engine turning over and causing lots of noise, this PV panel is sitting there silently collecting the sun's energy and topping up the battery.
How much would this generate then?
It's about 85 watts.
Okay, because the light bulb is generally about 100 watts, isn't it?
Yeah, some of the old light bulbs can be as much as 100 watts. Some of the new energy efficient light bulbs, 11 watts or less.
Oh, really?
And this could power a light bulb. The amount of energy you can get out of this could easily power a light bulb throughout a whole year.
I can see this on the top of a camper van.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and so what about this one? Very different in style, isn't it?
This one's what we call a laminate. It's just a piece of glass with PV cells laminated in between the two pieces of glass. Now this is great because you can mount this on the roof instead of tiles.
Ah, that's why it's skinny and flat.
Exactly, yeah, it just integrates into the roof really nicely. The clever thing about this is you put these up and you can't actually notice there's a PV roof there because it just takes the place of the tiles.
And how much would this generate?
I think this is a 40 watt panel, but you'd use this panel as well as 10 or 20 others to form a whole solar roof.
You've got panels that could go on walls, on roofs. What other kind of panels are available?
Believe it or not, this is our bike shed. Huh. On the other side of this is all our bikes. One of these arrays would power 20 PCs for over a year.
And is the entire office powered by this bike shed?
No, unfortunately, our office uses more electricity than this PV system produces over the year. Our building is also connected to the national grid.
Right, okay.
So the clever thing about PVs these days is when there's lots of sunlight around, the electricity flows into the building, and when there isn't much electricity around, we pull electricity from the national grid.
Okay.
And finally, I'd like to show you this panel, Shinny. This is a glass laminate. So we've got glass on this side, and
So
we've
it's
got glass
sandwiched.
on this side. Exactly. So an architect says, I want to have a building glass all the way up the front, and I need it this big and this high, and I need this amount of watts in it. You can ask this company will produce the panels exactly to the specification you need.
So what have we learned? The national grid transports electricity from power stations to our homes. PV systems can be grid connected or off-grid. When a grid-connected PV system cannot produce enough electricity, power can be taken from the grid. When it produces too much electricity, some is sold back to the grid. When an off-grid PV system produces more than enough electricity, power is stored in batteries. When it doesn't produce enough, power is drawn out of the batteries. Most solar PV systems are grid-connected.
So by connecting PV systems to the national grid, we can use solar energy when it's available, but still have a continuous power supply.